My name is Diana Brennan, and I'm 35 years old. If you'd asked me a year ago what my life looked like, I'd have told you it was calm, maybe even enviable. I had a stable career as an interior designer, a fiancé who remembered anniversaries, and a best friend who always showed up with coffee and gossip. The kind of life people post about online, not perfect, but pretty enough to envy. That illusion cracked one ordinary Sunday morning. I was scrolling through Nathan's Pinterest account. We shared it for house renovation ideas. We were planning to redo the kitchen before the wedding, and I needed to check a cabinet design he'd saved. I clicked through the boards, absently humming to myself until one title caught my eye. N and J Forever. At first I thought it was a mistake, maybe N and D, and he mistyped. But when I opened it, my stomach turned. The cover image was a wedding aisle lined with white roses. Every pin inside was about weddings, not ours, not anything like what we'd been planning, but another woman's vision. A woman who loved lace rustic wood tables, soft lilac hues. Each pin had comments in Nathan's handwriting style. Jasmine would adore this. Perfect for our first dance. Can't wait to call her my wife. My best friend's name. I stared at the screen, unblinking, while the coffee in my hand went cold. My first thought wasn't rage. It was disbelief so sharp it felt surgical. Surely there was an explanation, some shared board, some joke, something innocent. But the deeper I scrolled, the harder it became to breathe. There were over 200 pins, venues tagged in Italy and Greece, honeymoon suggestions, rings, notes, dates, a countdown widget titled 8 Months to Freedom. Freedom from what? From me. I closed the laptop, opened it again, half hoping the board would disappear. It didn't. The words remained glittering like shards of glass I couldn't unsee. In the reflection of the screen, I caught my own face, pale, detached, calm to the point of eerie. Some women scream when they're betrayed. Some throw things. I've seen that in movies. But I just started making lists. I took screenshots of every page, saved every pin, and printed the whole board, page after page sliding from the printer like quiet confessions. My studio smelled like ink and burnt coffee, but I didn't stop until I had evidence of it all, proof that the man I was supposed to marry had already built a dream life with someone else. Jasmine. The name looked different now. Once it meant laughter, shared secrets, late-night wine on my balcony. Now it was written across betrayal itself. I could almost hear her voice teasing me. You're lucky, Diana. Nathan's one of the good ones. Good ones don't write your best friend's name under my soulmate. I found emails next. He'd saved his password on our shared iPad, careless or confident. Either way, it took one tap. Their messages weren't explicit. They were subtler, the way long emotional affairs usually are. Inside jokes, shared playlists, complaints about me. She's always working late again. And Jasmine replying, you deserve better. That line burned into my brain. You deserve better. I scrolled through 10 months of messages. 10 months of building something behind my back. I could almost chart their intimacy, the way he started sending her photos of our dog, how she sent him recipes, how he started using her catchphrases in conversation with me. It wasn't physical, not yet, but it was enough. I sat back in my chair and let the silence settle. Then I reached for my notebook, the same one I used for design sketches, and turned to a blank page. At the top, I wrote in neat block letters, Project Freedom. Underneath, I listed steps, not of a wedding, but of a removal, not of flowers, but of consequences. If Nathan wanted a fantasy wedding with Jasmine, maybe I could help him build the world he was dreaming of. Just not here, not with me watching. By evening, the sun had dropped low through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the papers. My printer hummed one last time, spitting out a page with a picture of a seaside venue Jasmine had pinned. Perfect for our new beginning, she'd written in a note. I pinned it to my corkboard, not as decoration as evidence. That night, Nathan came home humming, kissed me on the forehead, and asked what I wanted for dinner. I smiled, set down my mug, and said softly, something Italian. He didn't notice my tone. He never did. When he went to shower, I stared at the ring on my finger. It looked different now, like it belonged to someone else. In the distance, a car door slammed, and I thought of Jasmine's laugh echoing up my driveway so many times. The laugh I'd always found comforting suddenly sounded cruel in memory. I whispered to myself, voice steady as a prayer, if he wanted a dream wedding with Jasmine. I turned off the printer, folded the papers into a neat stack, and slid them into a folder labeled Design Plans. And then I'd give him one. For the next few days, I became a ghost in my own home. I cooked, smiled, answered questions, laughed in all the right places. If Nathan noticed the shift, the new silence, the measured distance, he didn't show it. Men like him rarely sense earthquakes until the ground is already split. He thought I was focused on wedding preparations. In truth, I was cataloging details. Every message, every casual glance, every mention of Jasmine's name that crossed his lips. Each one went into my mental ledger. On Thursday evening, he came home with a bottle of wine. Guess who got invited to speak at the creative conference next month, Jasmine? I asked softly, pouring 2 glasses. He blinked, surprised. Yeah, how'd you know? I smiled faintly. You've mentioned her name more often than your own lately. He laughed, thinking I was joking. I clinked my glass against his and pretended I was too. That night, while he slept beside me, I opened my laptop again. Jasmine's social media was a predictable gallery of inspiration quotes and travel dreams. The woman was a walking Pinterest board of her own. Among her posts, one caught my attention, a throwback captioned, "Someday I'll design weddings in Italy." Perfect. I remembered an old client, Luca Moretti, an event planner in Florence I'd worked with years ago when designing interiors for his boutique agency. I still had his number buried in my contacts. I scrolled until I found it, my pulse oddly steady. When he answered the next morning, his voice was cheerful. "Diana, after so long, you've vanished on me. I've been busy," I said. "Listen, I have a favor to ask. Are you still hiring assistants for destination weddings? We're always looking for creative minds. Why, I know someone talented, detail-oriented, social media savvy. She's dreamed of working abroad. I think she'd be a perfect fit." He chuckled. "You sound convinced. What's her name? Jasmine Reed." I gave him her portfolio link, a few glowing reviews, and her email address, all public information. Nothing invasive. If she applies, I said casually, give her a chance. She deserves it. What I didn't add was, she deserves to be far away. That evening, I told Nathan that Jasmine had been talking about moving abroad. His eyes flickered, part surprise, part panic. Really? She didn't say anything to me. Maybe she will, I said. Sometimes people hide what they want most. 2 weeks later, Jasmine texted me. "Diana, you won't believe this. A planner from Florence saw my work and reached out. They want to interview me." I typed, deleted, retyped. "That's amazing. You've always wanted this. Go for it." She replied with hearts and excitement, completely unaware of the irony. For the next several days, I played the part of the supportive friend flawlessly. I helped her prepare for the interview, reviewed her portfolio, even lent her one of my Italian design books for inspiration. She hugged me tightly before leaving my studio. "You're my good luck charm." I smiled, meaning every word of my reply. Always have been. Nathan, meanwhile, started behaving differently. Distracted, anxious, glued to his phone. Sometimes I'd catch him scrolling jaw tight, as if waiting for something. One night, while he showered, I saw her name flashing on his screen. Jasmine. I got it. They offered me a 6-month contract in Florence. Nathan's reply popped up seconds later. "Wow, that's incredible. I'm proud of you. But I'm going to miss you like hell." My reflection in the dark screen smirked back at me. Later over dinner, he said, "Did you hear Jasmine's news?" "I did. Isn't it wonderful?" "Yeah, it's just sudden." "Dreams usually are," I murmured. He studied me for a moment. "You're not jealous, are you?" "Should I be?" I looked up from my plate, calm, unflinching. He hesitated. "No, of course not." "Good." I began helping Jasmine prepare for the move, packing logistics, even helping her sell furniture. Every moment was an exquisite act of theater. When she worried about leaving Nathan behind, I smiled gently. If it's meant to be, distance won't change anything. Behind those words was my quiet certainty distance would change everything. On the night before her flight, she came over with a bottle of wine and 2 paper cups. We sat on the porch where we'd once shared laughter. "Promise you'll visit," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "I'll try," I whispered. "Just promise me you'll love it there." She squeezed my hand. "You're the best you know," that I nodded. "I do." When she left, I stood at the doorway watching her taillights fade into the night. My home felt colder, quieter. But it wasn't emptiness. It was peace. Back inside, Nathan was scrolling on his phone again. "She texted from the airport," he murmured. "Said she's nervous." I smiled. "Tell her she'll do great." He did. When he finally looked up at me, I reached across the table, brushing my fingers over his hand. "You always said you wanted the people you loved to succeed," I said softly. "Now one of them finally will." He smiled, not realizing what I meant. As I cleared the dishes, I felt something loosen inside me. Not forgiveness, but control. The first taste of it. The kind of calm that only comes when you know every piece is falling exactly where you want it. Standing by the window, I watched him text her goodnight and whisper, "Sleep well, Jay." I whispered too under my breath, a toast only I could hear. When someone builds a fantasy world, sometimes the kindest thing you can do is make it real without them in it. Jasmine's flight was set for Sunday evening. By Friday, Nathan had the brilliant idea to throw her a farewell dinner. He wanted it to feel intimate, just the three of us, a celebration of her success. It was almost poetic. He was planning a final night with the woman he'd been emotionally unfaithful with, and he thought I'd help him host it. Of course, I said yes. That morning, I spent hours preparing the table, white linen, silver candles, soft jazz, humming in the background. It looked romantic, though not for the reason Nathan imagined. Every detail was deliberate. Every glance, every silence would land exactly where I wanted it to. When Jasmine arrived, she looked radiant, travel-ready, in a cream dress, hair, freshly curled perfume that lingered too long after she hugged Nathan. He held her just a second longer than politeness required. I noticed. So did she. I poured wine. To Florence, I said, raising my glass, and to brave women who chase what they want. She smiled a little nervously. To Florence, she echoed. Nathan clinked his glass and watched her like he was memorizing her face. The first 20 minutes were polite conversation, flight schedules, Italian food, sightseeing tips. Jasmine gushed about the company's upcoming events, about how lucky she felt. It's like the universe just opened a door. The universe, I said, quietly slicing my steak, can be very accommodating when someone deserves it. Nathan frowned slightly at my tone, but Jasmine just laughed. You always have a way of making things sound mysterious. Occupational hazard, I replied. Designers and secrets, we both live on details people overlook. Halfway through dinner, Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. I can't believe I'm actually leaving. Nathan reached across the table, covering her hand with his. You'll be amazing. Her eyes lingered on his unguarded, soft, too soft for friends. The air thickened. I set down my fork, folded my napkin, and smiled. You know, it's funny. I used to think love was something you hold on to, but sometimes it's just something you let leave. Neither of them replied. Nathan pulled his hand back slowly, clearing his throat. Dessert, he asked weakly. No dessert, I said, standing. Let's have a toast instead. I poured champagne. Jasmine's hand trembled slightly as she lifted her glass. To new beginnings, I said, locking eyes with Nathan. May distance make everything clearer. She nodded, uncertain. And to friendship, Nathan added. And to second chances. Careful, I said softly. Some chances don't come twice. Silence, the kind that hums in your bones. After dinner, Nathan insisted on driving her home, but I stopped him gently. No, I'll do it. You've had more to drink. He hesitated, then agreed. Jasmine followed me to the car, quiet. As I drove, the city lights slid across her face, half lit, half shadowed. She glanced at me. You've been different lately. Quieter. Work, I said simply. Not Nathan? She asked too casually. I smiled faintly. We're fine. She studied me a moment longer. You're hard to read, Diana. That's by design. At the airport, she hugged me tightly. I'll text you when I land, she promised. You have no idea how much this means to me. Oh, I think I do. She pulled back, confused. Just don't look back too much, I added, opening the car door for her. Florence is a beautiful city. It deserves your full attention. She laughed nervously. You sound like you're sending me off to exile. Exile, I smiled. No, just a fresh start. She rolled her suitcase toward the terminal, turning once to wave. I waved back. On the drive home, the silence felt alive. There's a unique kind of satisfaction that blooms when you realize a storm has passed, not because it missed you, but because you redirected it. When I arrived, Nathan was pacing the living room, his phone in hand. Is she okay? Did she board yet? She's fine, I said, taking off my coat. She's probably boarding now. He exhaled relief, washing over his face. I'll miss her. I know, I said, pouring myself a drink. He hesitated, watching me. You're not angry. I looked up at him, eyes steady. Why would I be angry about a dream coming true? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. You're amazing, you know that. I smiled, just barely. I've heard. When he went upstairs to pack for his business trip, I sat by the window, watching planes climb into the sky. Jasmine's would be among them, the perfect gift to a perfect couple who never existed. On the table, her empty champagne glass caught the candlelight glinting faintly like something sacred. I lifted it, traced the rim with my thumb, and whispered into the quiet, "Bon voyage, best friend." 3 weeks passed. The house grew quieter, emptier, as if it were exhaling after years of holding its breath. Nathan still came home every evening, but his energy had shifted, restless, distracted. His laughter had a hollow edge now, like a sound he was forcing himself to remember. He didn't mention Jasmine's name much at first. Then slowly she started creeping back into conversations. She texted me a photo from Florence, he said one morning over breakfast. "She looks happy." "That's good," I murmured, stirring my coffee. "She said the work is intense, but the view from her office is incredible. Florence usually is." He smiled absently. "You've been there twice. Once for work, once for recovery. Recovery from work." He laughed, but the humor never reached his eyes. By the following week, I noticed him sitting longer on his phone at night. The glow of the screen reflected in his eyes while he typed messages he thought I couldn't see. His smiles were small private ones, the kind that used to belong to me. I didn't say a word. I let him dig his own hole. One Friday night, he came home late, his tie loose, his expression clouded. He poured himself a whiskey and sat across from me. "You've been quiet lately." "So have you," I replied. He sighed, rubbing his face. "I miss her, Diana. Is that awful to say?" "Not at all," I said evenly. "It's honest." He looked up, searching my face for anger. He didn't find any, only calm. "That's the thing about honesty," I added softly. "Once it shows up, it tends to ask for company." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, standing and walking to the cabinet, "that I've known about you and Jasmine for months." He froze. The whiskey glass trembled slightly in his hand. What I opened the drawer, pulled out the thick folder labeled Design Plans, and set it in front of him. Paper by paper, I spread the evidence across the table, printed screenshots of his Pinterest board. The emails, the messages. Each one a quiet nail in the coffin of the life we'd built together. His face went pale. How? "Does it matter?" I asked, my voice calm. "You left it all right where I could find it. You just assumed I wouldn't look." He grabbed one of the pages, reading in disbelief. "It wasn't real, Diana. It was just a fantasy." "Yes. It wasn't physical. I never touched her, I swear." I leaned forward slightly. "You didn't have to. You built an entire future with her in your head, a wedding, a honeymoon, a home. You gave her everything I already had, only better. Tell me Nathan did that make you feel more alive." He dropped his gaze. "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that," I said quietly. He pushed back from the table, pacing. "You've been sitting on this." "For how long since I discovered it?" I replied. "The day you kissed me goodnight and told me you loved me, I already knew." He stared at me, horrified. "Then why didn't you say anything?" I smiled faintly. "Because you were planning your dream life with Jasmine." I didn't want to interrupt. He blinked. You set her up with that job, didn't you?" I tilted my head. "She always wanted to move to Florence. I just helped the universe make room for her." His expression crumpled, guilt, shock, realization all colliding. "You knew she'd go. I knew she couldn't resist it. You both made it easy. She wanted escape. You wanted her to have one. I just happened to offer the door." He sank into the chair, shaking his head. That's cruel." "No, Nathan," I said softly. "It's clean." The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that stretches between people who suddenly realize they've reached the edge of something permanent. Finally, he whispered, "Do you hate me?" I considered the question, tracing the rim of my coffee mug with one finger. "No." "Hate would mean I still cared enough to want you to suffer. I don't. You're just finished." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. I stood, gathered the papers, and stacked them neatly back into the folder. "You can stay here tonight," I said, "but tomorrow I want you gone." "Diana, don't." My tone was low final. "Don't ask for forgiveness. You wouldn't know what to do with it." He swallowed hard, nodding. "Where will I go?" I shrugged. "Maybe you can visit Florence." His face twisted, regret, shame, heartbreak, all tangled into something pathetic. I turned away before he could see the small, sad smile that crossed my lips. Later that night, I lay in bed while he packed quietly in the next room. The zipper of his suitcase sounded like a closing chapter. For a fleeting second, I wondered what Jasmine would think when he showed up in Italy, if she'd even open the door. Maybe she would. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my concern anymore. He paused by the doorway before leaving. "Diana," he said softly, "if I could take it back—" "You wouldn't," I replied. "You'd just hide it better." He stood there a moment longer, then walked out. The door closed behind him with a click so gentle it almost sounded polite. I stared into the darkness for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside. For the first time in months, it felt like the air was moving again. Sometimes peace doesn't arrive with closure. Sometimes it comes wrapped in the sound of a suitcase rolling down the driveway. "You designed your escape route with someone who wasn't me," I whispered into the dark. "Now live in it." When Nathan moved out, the silence that filled our house didn't hurt the way I expected it to. It was clean, precise, and strangely satisfying, like the echo left after a sharp cut. I started waking up earlier, working longer hours, reclaiming space that had once been cluttered with his presence. But quiet doesn't mean peace. The noise just changed form. It started with the phone calls. His mother Linda rang me one evening, her voice trembling with moral outrage. "Diana, how could you do this to Nathan? You're throwing away your engagement over nothing." "Nothing," I said calmly. "He planned a wedding with another woman." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You women overthink everything. It was probably a joke or creative inspiration." "Then maybe he should have pinned my name, not hers," I replied. She hung up after that, muttering something about forgiveness and family values. A few days later, Jasmine sent me an email from Florence. "Diana, I don't understand. Did you have something to do with the job offer? Luca said you referred me. Why?" I read it twice, sipping my tea. Then I wrote back one line. "You said you wanted a dream life. I simply held the door open." She never replied. Meanwhile, Nathan's version of the story started circulating, a tale of a vengeful fiancé who'd sabotaged his friend's life out of jealousy. People love a scandal, and he made sure they had one. I started getting curious stares from mutual acquaintances, subtle whispers at design events. One afternoon, a colleague approached me after a meeting. "Diana, is it true what people are saying?" "That depends," I said, closing my laptop. "What are they saying, that you sent your fiancé's friend out of the country to ruin their affair?" I smiled faintly. "If that's true, it sounds like I saved a lot on airfare." The rumor mill kept turning, but I didn't defend myself. The truth doesn't need noise to exist. It survives quietly. A month later, Nathan's lawyer reached out. He wanted to resolve matters amicably. Translation, he wanted money. We weren't married yet, but he'd moved into my house during our engagement, and apparently, he felt entitled to compensation for emotional distress. My lawyer, Clara, laughed when she read the letter. "He's out of his mind," she said. "There's no legal standing for that." "I know," I said. "But let's give him a chance to embarrass himself further." The following week, we met for mediation. Nathan sat across from me in the conference room, looking thinner, paler. There was a tremor in his hand when he picked up the pen. His lawyer spoke first. "My client has suffered significant emotional harm due to Ms. Brennan's actions." Clara leaned forward. "Your client created a digital fantasy marriage with another woman while engaged to mine. Ms. Brennan merely provided the opportunity for that woman to relocate for work." The mediator blinked. "Is that accurate?" Nathan shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't real. Clara placed the printed Pinterest board in front of him. 200 wedding pins labeled N and J forever say otherwise. He looked at me across the table, desperate. "Diana, I told you it didn't mean anything. You built a world where I didn't exist," I said softly. "That means something." He looked away. The settlement was simple. I agreed to return his remaining personal belongings and cover the joint utility bills for the last month. In exchange, he signed a waiver of any claim to shared assets. When he finished signing, I stood to leave. "Diana," he said quietly, "I can't believe how cold you've become." I turned, my voice calm. "You mistake clarity for coldness. That's your problem. Always has been." By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. Another message, this one from Jasmine. He showed up at my apartment. I told him not to. Please make him stop. I stared at the message for a moment, then replied, "I can't make him do anything, Jasmine. You'll have to learn what that's like, too." Later that night, Clara called. "Nathan's lawyer just withdrew the emotional distress claim. Apparently your evidence was persuasive." "I bet it was," I said, gazing at the folder on my desk, my collection of cold, clean truth. By now, Nathan's family had turned entirely against me. His mother left a voicemail I never returned. "You've ruined him. You'll regret this." But regret is for people who doubt their choices. I didn't. At work, I found myself more focused than ever. Clients commented on how grounded I seemed. I smiled, not telling them that peace often looks like still water, hiding the wreckage beneath. Occasionally, I'd get updates through mutual acquaintances. Nathan moved back in with his parents. Jasmine's contract in Florence was extended, but her performance was reportedly erratic. It wasn't triumph I felt, just a strange, quiet pity. My therapist once told me, revenge is just anger trying to find purpose. I disagreed. Revenge isn't about anger, it's about balance, and balance had been restored. Still, some nights, I caught myself replaying the smallest moments the way Nathan's eyes lit up when Jasmine texted the tremor in his voice when I confronted him, the hollow in his smile, when he realized I'd known everything. He once told me that I was too calm for my own good. That's the irony. Calm is what kept me from falling apart while his world unraveled. One evening, as I packed away the last of his things into a storage box, I found a note he'd written me years ago. "You're my home, Diana." I stared at it for a long time, then folded it neatly and dropped it in the trash. Some things aren't meant to be kept, not even as reminders. Before going to bed, I looked out the window, the moonlight spilling across the table where the wedding plans once sat. I whispered to no one in particular. "You wanted a perfect life. I just helped you live it somewhere far enough away that I could finally breathe." Then I turned off the lights. 6 months later, everything looked different. The house was gone, sold to a young couple who sent me pictures of their renovation progress like it was a newborn baby. I didn't mind. I'd already stripped the place of its ghosts before handing over the keys. Now I live in a smaller apartment overlooking the Willamette River. White walls, soft gray curtains, and a single vase of eucalyptus by the window. Every object here has a purpose. Every silence is earned. My mornings start with sunlight instead of suspicion. I make my coffee water the little fern on the windowsill and work from my desk by the balcony. There's no longer a toothbrush that isn't mine, no footsteps in the hallway that belong to someone else. Freedom is quieter than I imagined. Sometimes I still hear his name Nathan carried to me through other people. A friend at a gallery mentioned she'd run into him downtown. "He looks tired," she said. "Older." I smiled. He always aged in guilt faster than time. Another acquaintance told me Jasmine was still in Florence, though her new life hadn't gone as perfectly as planned. Her social media, once filled with glittering snapshots of Italian weddings, had gone eerily sparse. Her captions turned vague talk of burnout and restarting. Once she posted a photo of herself sitting on the Arno Bridge at sunset with the caption, "Be careful what you wish for." I didn't like the photo. I didn't even smile. I just closed the app. Nathan tried calling me once from an unknown number. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, his voice soft frayed. I wanted to say I'm sorry, for all of it, for her, for the lies, for the way I made you feel small when you were the only one who ever saw me clearly. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it. I deleted it after listening once. Some apologies are like wilted flowers, meant for the giver, not the receiver. Therapy helped eventually. My therapist told me one afternoon, "You seem calm, but calm can hide unspoken grief. Do you ever miss him?" I thought about it. "No," I said truthfully, "but I sometimes miss the version of me who trusted easily." She nodded. "That's the cost of clarity. But peace costs nothing. You earn it by not returning to what broke you." That stayed with me. Work began thriving again. My reputation, briefly clouded by gossip, had cleared. Clients sought me out for my designs. Elegant, deliberate, timeless, they said. I smiled at that last word. Timeless. That's what happens when you stop measuring your life by someone else's clock. One evening, after finishing a late project, I stepped onto the balcony. The sky was bruised with dusk, city lights flickering awake. I could almost feel the weight of the past dissolving into the air around me. My neighbor, a widowed older woman named Miriam, waved from the next balcony. "You look lighter these days," she said. "Maybe I am," I answered. I finally stopped carrying things that weren't mine. Inside a box, sat in the corner, the last trace of my old life. Inside were the printed screenshots, the evidence that once fueled my quiet war. I knelt, opened the lid, and took one last look at the pages. Jasmine's smiling pins, Nathan's messages, my own handwriting across the margins, Phase 1, Phase 2, closure. It didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like history. And history doesn't need to be destroyed. It just needs to be filed away. I walked downstairs to the riverbank behind the building. The air smelled like rain and moss. One by one, I fed the papers into a small portable fire pit. They curled and darkened glowing orange before dissolving into ash. When the last flame went out, I whispered, not bitterly, but with simple finality, "Thank you, both of you, for teaching me what happens when love turns into fantasy and what freedom feels like when fantasy burns away." Back upstairs, I opened the window. The city hummed quiet, distant, alive. I poured myself a glass of wine, looked around my minimalist living room, and smiled at the stillness. No drama, no noise, just breath. As I watered the fern by the window, a line came to me, one that belonged to this new version of my life, not the old one. I didn't ruin their fantasy. I just helped it find a place far away where it could never touch me again. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something pure, not triumph,